Hello, all. Welcome to yet another episode of the podcast by Agile Coaching Roundtable ACRT with me, Vivek Kuntoji, and my co host, Ramya Shastri. In today's episode, we have Gunther Verheyen to talk about humanizing workspace with Scrum. I'm not going to talk much about his introduction as this man needs no introduction. I would like to just say that Gunther Verheyen calls himself an independent Scrum caretaker on a journey of humanizing the workplace with Scrum. He's a long-time Scrum practitioner who started applying Scrum in 2003. He has published two acclaimed books about Scrum and was a partner of Ken Schwaber, who is a co-creator of Scrum as a director of professional Scrum series at scrum.org. So without further ado, let's welcome Gunther.
Hello, Gunther. Welcome to the podcast by Agile Coaching Roundtable. It's a great pleasure and honor to have you on our show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Ramya, for the invitation, and to you too, Vivek. It's an honor to be on your show. So thank you.
Thank you,
Tha-
Gunther.
yes. So today we need to or we want to have a conversation around humanizing the workspace topic. The reason why we chose this topic, we could have, spoken about Scrum and all those things with you, but then specifically we chose this topic. One, I know for the fact that you are onto a mission for humanizing the workspace. Two, this is also our latest theme wherein we are talking about job and work culture. So we thought who better than you to talk about this. So to begin with, I would want to understand. It's a curious question. Why do you think of humanizing workspace when you are already into Scrum and it's like there could be any other topic in Scrum, but why specifically you chose to humanize the workspace?
Because I believe that in all of the years that Scrum has been around, and that's been a very long time, because as you know, Scrum was sort of formed or shaped in 1995 to 1999, sort of when Scrum sort of emerged or was defined as we know it today. In all those years of Scrum, we have achieved a lot. And I think Scrum practitioners around the world should be proud of that. But what I see in that sense, we have achieved a lot. We have moved from projects to product focus more, which gives us a bit more stability. Companies, organizations are getting the idea of the iterative incremental development with Scrum, how we organize work in short cycles that we call sprints, away from predictive management into a more empirical way of working. But what I miss is the focus on people. So for me, Scrum, beyond, let's say, the formal rules of Scrum as defined in the Scrum Guide, sort of two basic but elementary, what I call management principles underlying Scrum are what I just called empiricism, meaning empirical process control, that iterative incremental way of working in short cycles, regularly stopping to reflect, look back, change, update, and so on. It gives us a lot of adaptability. But the second management principle almost underlying Scrum for me is self-organization. And the combination of those two is what I call Scrum's DNA. So it's the DNA of Scrum. In that sense, every implementation of Scrum, as far as I'm concerned, should be built on that DNA, meaning the combination of empiricism and self-organization. But empiricism, let's say, that is sort of the process aspect of Scrum. And that is what I sometimes call the more cold aspect of Scrum. In that sense, the more easy, it's more neutral, it's more something you can grasp rationally almost. So a lot of organizations are getting that, the advantage of working those short cycles. But what I miss, I feel we've run into a very unbalanced situation, because from Scrum's DNA, empiricism and self-organization, most companies, if not all companies, focus too much on the process aspect only, and they forget or they overlook the people aspect of Scrum. And as you know, we got the name of Scrum from a very old paper, 1986, the new product development game. Now, the new product development game revolves almost completely around this idea of self-organization. So we all know the two Japanese professors, Taikochi and Onaka, they described what they had found in their research, what made some companies more successful than other companies in delivering and building new products. It even had nothing to do with IT or software development. And it all revolves around that idea of self-organization. Now, when Scrum was shaped in the 90s, let's say in that sort of at least a decade, first half of the 90s, experimenting and trying out, and the second half of the 90s, more like formally shaping it, that idea of self-organization was essential. Next to that, the idea of empiricism was added. That was not in that paper of the new product development game. But over the years, many companies have adopted Scrum, introduced Scrum, but they always focus so much on the process aspect. And that process has taken over the world, which is beautiful, great. But there's an unbalance. The focus is on the process and not on the people aspect of Scrum. And for me, the people aspect of Scrum is that idea of self-organization. And, this year, we're now 2023, and I'm sort of celebrating 20 years of Scrum. Which, by the way, a long time ago, I started with extreme programming, which we later on wrapped in Scrum, which was also crucial for my own insights and experience with Scrum, by the way, but that's another topic. But in those 20 years of Scrum, I've done many things, but one of the things was working and exclusively partnering with Ken Schwaber, one of the co-creators of Scrum, and Scrum.org from 2013 until 2016. And in 2016, I decided I wanted to be really on my own 2 feet and be out there again. And so I stopped sort of the exclusivity of working with Ken and Scrum.org. So I wanted to do other stuff and do other types of work too. And then I had my own little company. It's a one-person company. And in 2016, I had to think about a title for myself because I had a beautiful title before I worked with Ken. I was at Capgemini where I was a principal consultant. It's a very important thing, whatever. Certainly for the people in the organization, I felt not so much for me. So I don't care about titles too much. And then at Scrum.org, I was called director of the professional series. And then suddenly just my own 2 feet, my own one-person company. And it felt a little bit strange to call myself the CEO of my own one-person company because I'm not only the CEO, I'm also the marketing manager and I do all of my administration and I'm therefore also the secretary. I'm also the cleaning lady and I'm also my own help desk support agent, whatever. So I felt like let's think about a title and between quotes, let's say a title that represents who I would like to be. And so I came up with this title that I call an independent Scrum caretaker. I started out with Scrum caretaker and then added independent to that to make very clear to the world that I'm not part of any fixed whatever type of organization. I'm on my own 2 feet. And then I wanted to add something to that is what is sort of at the heart of everything that I do. And that was 2016. So I started with Scrum and extreme programming back in 2003. So some things you just recognize after a while. So let's say by that time, 2016, I looked back and I said, what is now so essential to me? And also thought about feedback I had gotten from many teams and people that I've worked with up to that point in my career. And it's over and over again for me at the heart of things is always working with people. It's also, by the way, in 2003 when people told me about extreme programming and later on we discovered Scrum, that was also what attracted me so much. It's all about interaction and dialogue between people collaborating, people within the team and across the team with customers and so on. But again, I realized in my life, it's all about people. So combining that, calling myself an independent Scrum caretaker, where I hope that the word caretaker means that I don't only care about Scrum because I'm a Scrum caretaker, but also reflects hopefully that it's just about caring, which is sort of a very human thing, I hope. So it's not just caring about Scrum, which I deeply do, but also caring about the people in Scrum or the people involved in Scrum. And I hope that is reflected in this caretaker ID. And then that finding by that time that this unbalance between the process aspect of Scrum and the people aspect of Scrum. And then I felt like, oh my God, there's a lot of room for improvement in there. By sort of getting the people aspect more front and center in adoptions and introductions of Scrum. So that is for me reflected in what I call my journey of humanizing the workplace with Scrum. We have a lot of work to do. The process aspect of Scrum, that is still also a lot of work to do, but that is getting through. We don't have to explain what sprints are anymore and how that works, but that people aspect, meaning self-promoting, let's say self-organization in Scrum, because those two go hand in hand. Huh? Self-organization and then self-organization in a way bounded within working within boundaries, bounded by that empirical process in which we regularly stop to reflect, look back, change, update, and so on. But within those boundaries, we ask people, we trust people to be capable to organize their own work. And for me, sort of risk management, let's say, or whatever people would call it risk, is in those boundaries, because we
Absolutely.
ask people to regularly stop, not take more time than a sprint to do certain stuff, then certainly stop, inspect, look back, and change, update, change direction, whatever they think is most useful at that point. So that is sort of the somewhat longer story behind my title, let's say, and why I believe in this journey of humanizing the workplace.
That is really amazing to understand the thought process or the idea or the whole uh, perspective in terms of you rightly put it across in a wonderful storytelling, I would say, and definitely focusing on those important DNAs of one is the process and one is the people. And it also, in a certain way, brings me back to the Agile Manifesto. Also, it talking about individual and interactions, right?
Yeah.
So again, when we are, when we are overlooking at people, it definitely puts the process into question, and that is where I could take out the entire context that you had, wonderfully explained it. So thank you for sharing those thoughts. And with that, again, I have a particularly similar question since you started speaking about people, human over here. So in this fast-paced world where AI is particularly taking over jobs, do you feel that we need to humanize workplace more? I mean, we are doing it, but do you think it is more important now again to start doing it?
I think it's going to at least remain very important. It already is. It is a lot more important than a lot of people think. Certainly, in that sort of, we're still sort of, it feels like some organizations still don't realize that we are making a huge shift from a sort of industrial society to a society that revolves around information, knowledge, um, data, IT, software, the internet, and so on. So that is a huge shift. And as part of that shift already, the focus on the people aspect is incredibly important and a lot more important than most companies currently recognize. They are still founded on, let's say, what I call in my book. I've written a book about Scrum, a pocket guide. What I call the industrial paradigm. Still that sort of tailorist idea of trying to control people, breathing down their necks, holding them responsible, holding them accountable, and so on. That is not really helpful. So just introducing the process of Scrum, but with that sort of attitude next to that, not helpful. So we're still fighting, or we're still helping organizations get over that sort of old industrial thinking. And my assumption is that as AI will become more important, which I think is going to happen. I think there's no denying that. That humanization will remain important to potentially, and I think I'm looking into the future. I don't have a crystal ball, but looking into the future, we'll probably see a lot of organizations that become overly confident and will rely overly on things like AI. And just simple example, we're still 2023, right? So I'm looking into the future. So expecting people to be treated as people, not as, I don't know, in the future, maybe we now call them, I always say people are people, not resources in that sense, not
Oh God.
pieces, yeah, not pieces of machinery, not cogs in a machine and so on. Maybe in the future we'll say people are people and not AI robots or so, whatever. But currently, looking at what the state of AI currently, these days there's been a lot of things past year, let's say about ChatGPT and so on. I haven't looked into it too much because currently I don't feel it as a threat at all. I've been checking in with a number of programmers, people, developers that I work with in organization, and asking them, do you use ChatGPT to write your code and so on? And every single one of them says, yes, it's useful, it's handy, it's nice, it's quick. But the result coming from ChatGPT, I still have to carefully look at it and check it for whatever syntax and so on for their programming. So even there, still the human thing is even can't be skipped, and that's honestly because my feeling over ChatGPT, it's a very smart language engine in a way. It knows how to produce sort of human language, but it's still based on existing sources out there on the internet and existing things. It doesn't create anything new in that sense. It just collects information from around the internet and puts it in a readable format or in a readable document or paragraph or text or whatever. So at this point of time, certainly the human input is more than needed. But I think it will always be, no matter how complex AI might help us, might facilitate us, but I cannot imagine a world, honestly, where that human input and that human checking will no longer be needed. Because if
Okay.
that would be the case, we would be sort of perfectly robotizable world or so, which is well, but maybe my
Absolutely.
fantasy is not good enough.
Yeah. Also, I mean, also to just to maybe to share my perspective over here. I mean, till the time there is creativity in the job, till the time there is collaborations within multiple people, I don't think so. Maybe it is easy to say that every person in the team or individual is going to be replaced. Till the time there is a creativity for a particular job, there is a collaboration required. That is what
Yeah,
my perspective at this point of time is.
yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I feel about AI is sort of in a way again those sort of promises that it will liberate time from people and they will have to spend less time at work and so on. And honestly, we've been there, we've seen that, and it never happened. That was a sort of promise and expectation almost in several ways of the industrialization. So the industrialization over, let's say, the past couple of 200 years, let's say, there's been this sort of promise, expectation, hope, dream that people would have to spend less time at work, and it never happened. It probably actually at certain points in time became even worse. So when things get automated and machines started being used more and more and more, people thought that some people promised to other people that you will get more spare time now, but actually never really
Correct.
happened. So, and I see that occurring again, and I'm like, yeah, but you know what? Look at history. Look at even the past 200 years. That never happened. So I don't expect it to happen with AI either. And that's again for me another reason to keep pushing for that humanization of the workplace. So
Yes,
I used to call it demechanization, but maybe the future will have to call it differently. But
yes, and even I feel the exactly the same. What has been my perspective in entire this AI thing is that the more technologically advanced we become, the more basic we will also get into. So basic things like, talking to people or maybe interacting, collaboration, the more technologically advanced we go, but we will stick back to more basic things, because that are the things people would be forgetting actually. and
Yep.
and this is what I feel. AI can replace our artificial intelligence, but it cannot replace our emotional intelligence. So that is
Yep.
something we have to do ourselves. And wherever there is a point of collaboration or people involved, no AI or no technology can replace, isn't it? And
Yeah.
you also talked about a very beautiful point. About calling people as resources, and I
Mhm.
am strictly against it. That is the first thing that puts me off whenever people refer someone as resources,
Yep.
and that I feel and I see as a red flag in the organization. So, what are the red flags according to you to dehumanize the workplace in any organization?
Well, that old school industrial mindset, pressuring people, um, signs of dehumanization is something I see, and I think it's happening in a lot of countries, sort of in the continual increase of number of burnouts, long-term absenteeism of people, illness, sickness of people. Even this weekend, I was reading about it. So the continuous increase in number of burnouts, certainly in Belgium, but I see it in a lot of European countries, and I think it's happening around the world. That at least is a sign of the fact that we are not humanizing the workplace just yet, because burnout is typically seen, despite the fact that there is no clear medical or whatever definition of what is a burnout. It is still something that is happening. It is real, and it is almost unanimously related to the workplace. Depression is a different thing, so that's more gray. That might there's certainly a lot of connected to people's personal life, but burnout is almost uniquely connected to the workplace. And recently, even here in my country, I live in Belgium, in Antwerp, there were figures, data released by government, and that show a steady increase in the number of burnouts year after year after year. And it seems we're unable to stop that. And that is a sign that we are at least not humanizing the workplace yet. It means there's a lot of pressure. People are almost feel strangled, or they suffocate in the workplace. They fall out, they drop out, whatever. They have to stay at home. And for me, what is in a way the most sad thing in those cases, that I don't see organizations, leadership seeing that as a wake-up call. No, the first response seems to be to blame those people too, and blaming it on them, and like, you have to be stronger and have to be able to stick up to that. And I know sometimes people, in my days we could whatever, and I'm like, yeah, how helpful is that? It is real. People in that sense are suffering, and it means that with the increased presence of Scrum, I really hope that we could turn that evolution around and see a decrease in those things. And I was reminded of that again several years ago. So I went sort of independent freelance, completely freelance in 2016. And I think not too long after that, I was asked by an organization to write an article, to contribute with an article to a magazine, an Agile magazine that they had, about performance management. I call it performance management in the world of Scrum. And in researching, doing some research, that paper, I found an institute. It's called the Gallup Institute. It's in the US, and they regularly, every so many years, they do surveys around the world, checking in with people about their what they call engagement in the workplace or on the workplace, meaning how engaged do you feel. So as I was looking into angles to write about whatever between quotes performance management in the world of Scrum, and I was trying to relate that to the people aspect, and then those figures sort of blew my mind in a negative way, honestly, because they find over and over again, it's connected to those burnouts and long-term absenteeism and so on. They find over and over again that in general, on average, globally, it's a little bit different depending on the region. But let me sort of summarize it. Generally, only about 20% people, 20% of people on the work floor are really engaged, motivated, believe in the work, like to do their work, are willing to go the extra mile or whatever. That really 20% of the work, only 20% of the workforce really likes to come to work, do their work, believe in the company, and from that belief work. That is really sad. So when I talked about performance management, I used that in that article that I wrote to start talking about what I call humanizing the workplace. Why, again, why is it so important? Because there is not a single organizational aspect or a domain or an area, whatever, that has so much room for improvement. Only 20% of the workforce is really engaged. So beyond that, it's about 60% of the workforce, slightly more, that is sort of not engaged, but in the sense what I call sort of couldn't care less attitude. They just go to work 9 to 5, and as long as they get their paycheck or their salary by the end of the month, that's about it. For the rest, sort of, yeah, a little bit sort of, yeah, numb and not really engaged. But what is even worse is that 15 to 20% of the workforce is what they call actively disengaged. Now imagine that means about 15 to 20% of the workforce is not just on the edge, but sometimes really working against the company, against the colleagues, against objectives, whatever. So, and several years ago, I did a sort of a training, a Scrum training for HR directors from a global company. So all the HR directors of their international subsidiaries. And there was a really great lady from, I believe she was from Brazil, and said, yeah, you know what, Gunther, and those 15 to 20% of sort of disengaged people, negatively engaged people, the harm that they do really surpasses all the good that those 20% engaged people do. So
My God.
so humanizing the workplace, there is nothing in the world you can keep pressuring people, you can make them work faster, you can introduce AI, you can use whatever, but you will never have an area, you will never find an area of work that has so much room for improvement. And that's so sad that all those organizations miss that. And in general, regular HR departments or whatever in the organizations, and Ramya and Vivek, we agree people are people. So human resources department is something awkward,
Exactly.
at least in that name. But let's
Yes.
just stick to that for the time being. HR departments, I feel they are not acting professionally. If you would be a professional HR person working for a professional HR department, you would know about what motivates people, what doesn't motivate people. You would know about engagement on the workforce, on the workplace or not, and you would try to do something about it. But again, we're still in that industrial age of processes and procedures and pre-filled forms and filling in these things and checklists and so on. It's, yeah, not really helpful. But those figures from the Gallup Institute, then combined with official figures that you can find also from the WHO organization, so the World Health Organization of the United Nations, it's shown over and over again. And I'm like, oh my God, what do we need to realize that this is not going in the right direction? We are still not treating people as human beings. And which is strange because often, I don't know how that over there, but it sort of means that we almost expect people to come to the office in the morning and go to, let's say, the entrance gate and leave all of their human things behind them. As if they don't have a personal life, as if somebody is not more happy at home and somebody else might be less happy at home, if somebody is going through a difficult period or not. You can't expect people to leave that behind them once they go to the entrance gate. And I think it's even would be even powerful because what I also said on the basis of that research by the Gallup Institute, you know what? Engaged people actually care a lot more about the team, about the work, about their customers. if they're really engaged. So try to increase engagement of your people. And I'm very sure that your customer satisfaction, the employee happiness, your returns, your benefits, your profits, your whatever will all go up. But don't make that a target. It's almost like it will be a side effect. I'm sure of it. Imagine an organization of, let's put a figure that, of 1,000 people, where only 20%, 200 people are really engaged. Imagine we could uplift those 20% to 30, 40, only 50%.
Correct.
How more, in a way, productive would those people be? How more results, how more better work would just result from that increased level of engagement. So, but yeah, in our world, so sort of we're all focused on money so much, and that's what's not working. So
And this is
what
all,
I yeah,
and
go ahead.
all of this is happening when we know for the fact that maximum time we spend in office or at work, right?
Yeah,
And despite knowing this, and people are not engaging. So it's like if we have to see on an average in a day, if we spend like more than 9 hours or 10 hours a day and leaving our sleep time, maximum time we spend working, and that maximum time we are just trying to be as emotionless as possible and just keeping to ourselves. This is so
yeah.
sad, and all of the issues that you mentioned in the organization, that are going to happen if this is going to continue, because we need to understand that is our workplace, and that is what we are trying to
Yeah.
build as a team together, or maybe as an organization together. So if this is going to continue, then definitely this is what is the result that we are seeing: less engagement, less productivity. So how much ever metrics that we want to put, this is never going to improve the situation.
No, right. And it's what saddens me so much about it, because I think about people in a way holistically as much as possible. You know, how much time we spend on the workplace. How sad is it that we can't enjoy that work, that we don't like it, that we don't want to go there, that we only go there to sort of get some sort of salary by the end of the month. That is, look at, make sort of the sum of all that time across a lifetime. That's so sad that you've lost an enormous proportion of your life doing something that you don't really believe in, you don't like to do. So it's that also makes me let's say somewhat sad. So those are the things that drive me, and like you just said, in a way, because you've referred to this sort of idea. I don't really do it on purpose. This thing that is called utilization. Yeah? Again, an expression of the old way of thinking, the industrial way of thinking, utilization. So that is something that applies to a machine. You spend a lot of money
Absolutely.
buying a machine. You want to have it up and running and producing output as much as possible because you spend a lot of money on it. Now,
Yes.
people are not resources, and utilization is not what should drive us. Because utilization in the context of working with people only means being busy or pretending to be busy so that you can report out or timesheets or whatever. So whenever organizations are focused on utilization, it means they're still stuck in the industrial way of thinking in terms of, so treating people as resources, thinking in terms of utilization, even productivity, are all still expressions of another shift that organizations have not made, which is important with Scrum, is the shift from volume oriented thinking to value, because volume only means doing more, faster, quicker, whatever. Value means doing the right things. Whether that's more or not, doing the right thing at the right time. That is for me a value-oriented way of thinking. And that means people in Scrum, people of a team of developers in Scrum, it's not about being busy. It's about doing the right work at the right time, according to the ordering and the priorities of the product owner, and that's it. And then even within the constraints of what is in the Agile Manifesto called sustainable pace, right? It should be sustainable in the longer term. Stressing yourself out for a sprint and the next sprint, and it's not helpful. The idea of Scrum is to make life sustainable on the workplace, sprint after sprint after sprint. Why we organize work in short cycles that we call sprints, it's all about focus. Focus on what is most important now, focus on quality, focus on value. It's not that idea of like in sports, quickly running as quickly as possible. No, it's about focus, having a sort of outcome every sprint, and then taking time to reflect, look back, learn, and so on. So that shift from volume to value, that is also tied into that, because a volume-oriented way of thinking is about productivity, doing more, the amount of output that you create, and not. I always say it might be strange because you could have with Scrum a high velocity, the typical term that is associated with that, meaning a large amount of output. But what is the value? What is the meaningfulness of producing a lot of work if you are driving in the wrong direction anyhow? If you're producing
Absolutely.
features that functions that nobody wants, that nobody's asking for. So that is the problem. If I sometimes compare it to what is this focus on, again, performance management. I also hate this idea of high performance teams or high performance teams, by the way, because it sort of tied into old language for me. So I like to talk about highly collaborative teams, teams that show high levels of collaboration, and performance will be a result of a highly collaborative team. But collaboration is what we focus on. The rest will come out of that. But imagine we all focus on high performance teams. In that sense, in a car metaphor, we want to sort of upgrade and tweak and tune the engine of the car. But what is the point of driving with a Formula One type of car on a bumpy road, full of crossroads, full of full of cobblestones, and with traffic lights everywhere, and crashes happening around us? That's not the idea. So the idea for me, for an organization via the Scrum Master, is to make sure that you clear the road, that there's a clear view, and that you're driving in the right direction. Meaning, if you have to drive to the west, it makes no sense to produce a lot of features as you're driving towards the east. That is pointless. So that is the goal of an organization management leadership. Not breathe down people's neck all day long, not hold them accountable for doing work according to their estimates, not holding them accountable for sitting still 1 hour when you saw it, for spending too much time on the coffee machine, whatever. And already in that paper of the new product development game, 1986, even then they already said that, and I'm going to try to quote this literally. Already then they said organizations need to adopt a management style that promotes this process. And that process was the process of self-organization, which nowadays we call Scrum. But also in that paper, they started calling it Scrum too. So they already said you need to adapt a management style. And the summary of that is you have to manage from the outset, which is in that sense helpful because we've added empiricism to that, meaning you manage on, let's say, the outset of a sprint. Basically, leadership, managers, stakeholders, whatever, they go to a sprint review, and that is the point where they interact with people. For the rest, they leave them alone, and there they can add their feedback. And then it's still about feedback, not about judging, not about making people justify for what they've done or not have done. It's about helping them to become even better. If you feel they're driving in the wrong direction, tell them what the better direction is. So again, for me, it starts already by a sprint review should not be about volume, not about the amount of work that was done, but about the content of the work. Is this the right content? Is this content that will help us increase customer satisfaction? Is this content that will help us increase the benefits for the organization? And if not, what could we change? What could we tweak? What could or should we do differently? What should we keep doing? So that is all. So that shift from volume to value is also connected to that, because
Yes.
Scrum is
And
all about value and not volume.
absolutely. And that is where I think most of the organizations now have there are certain values identified, and in a certain way focusing on the culture. They talk more now on the culture, and that is where when humanizing workplace is all about focusing on the most
Yeah,
important thing is what culture we would like to follow, whether in a certain way we are trying to focus more on the profit in terms of ignoring the people around. No, that is not what the culture for us is. Maybe the culture is focus on the people, and maybe the profits would follow. And that is where
yeah,
again I see in a certain way the Scrum Guide again makes a mention of certain values, and that is what I feel it puts into the perspective of in a certain way humanizing the workplace. And similarly, on that particular point where the Scrum Guide talks about those values, do you think Scrum has maybe in a certain way the guide does not mention explicitly about humanizing workspace, but it does describe Scrum as a collective intelligence of the team, right? Which
yeah.
means it's indicating towards people. So what are your thoughts on this particular point?
Yeah, well, that is a way of saying it's all about organization and the emergence indeed of the collective intelligence in which sort of the intelligence, the creativity, insights of a group of people is bigger than just the sum of, let's say, the individual knowledge. Yeah, the only thing in the latest Scrum Guide they have renamed self-organization to self-management, which I honestly regret, because it also disconnects us a little bit from that old paper, the new product development game. They introduced the idea of self-organization. It had was on the way slowly of becoming a sort of established term, and now they've changed that. The idea, I think, was to make it more clear. That means a group manages itself. Self-organization was, in that sense, maybe more generic. But I personally I like that because that means people have to think about it. And for me, self-organization, but that might be just my point of view, can be more than just self-management. In that sense, let me give an example. But for me, at least Scrum starts with self-management as an expression of self-organization. That means a manager-led team, a manager-led, or even the senior developer leading all the things and making all decisions, or the software architect, or whatever. That is not a self-organizing thing. It starts by a group of people managing their own work in a context of Scrum, meaning within the sprint, nobody is telling the team who should be doing what at what point of time. The way we try to control that is by looking at the sprint review on what they have done, what we think it should have been, what we think how it could be improved, and so on, but not by telling people what to do. So that is moving from, so there's no central, let's say, assignment unit or person telling people what to do. They figure that out as a team. It's also why I liked the idea of development team more than calling it now developers. So I consistently try to call it a team of developers because I want to get that idea of working as a team across. So within a sprint, the only boundary that we sort of impose, let's say, is that we ask them on a daily basis to make sure that they are aligned with each other via the daily Scrum. But beyond that, we have no rules about in Scrum on who should be doing what. But that's for me only the start. That means a group is able to manage its own work within a sprint. But I've worked with a lot of organizations, and I certainly remember working with the last big organization that I was engaging with as an external Scrum coach. Um, is I saw some teams really making a lot of progress in terms of motivation, engagement, and taking up work from all the teams that I was able to work with. And some of those teams that were really making good progress, they plummeted again. They fell flat again. Motivation disappeared again. And I was looking at, I was so estranged. And then I found out it was all because people external to the team were interfering in the team composition regularly. Oh, now you have to go work over there. Or you also have to work on that team because they need you also. And then suddenly people are not accountable for really organizing their own work anymore. In that sense, self-management is just a start. I also like the idea that if people are capable and intelligent enough to manage their own work in the sprint, that means those people are also capable and intelligent enough to decide who should be in the team, what extra skill do we need, what skills do we have enough of, what don't we have enough of, maybe where do we have too much of. In that sense, we should leave those people alone and figure out the team size and so on for themselves and help them, facilitate them, help figure that out. So beyond self-management, that is what I call, for instance, self-designing teams. So even if you would have a really self-managing team, if you think as a PMO, a project manager, a department lead or whatever, thinking that you know better who should be working on what team at what point of time, you haven't got the idea of self-organization yet. So that's my
Absolutely.
view on self-organization and self-management. Self-organization, a little bit more difficult to explain, but at the same time, it's a beautiful challenge of giving it meaning for yourself. And it starts with self-management for me, but it doesn't have to end there. And I'm afraid that by calling it self-management in the Scrum Guide, that people will see, yeah, but it's only that. No, 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 no. That's only the start.
Yes, and you beautifully explained what is self management and self organization. And I think for the listeners who use these terms interchangeably will get the difference between both the terms. And I'm glad that you mentioned about self designing. That's a kind of a light bulb moment for me. Yes, why not call it as a self designing teams, right? I mean, they can take a decision on who, what, better, how many people, which skill set in the
Yeah.
teams should be present. And this also brings me to a thought that it's like, I mean, when we talk about, say, humanizing workspace with Scrum, implementing Scrum at a team level will not create that impact unless it's a part of a culture, right? So, how can we onboard leaders in this journey?
Yeah, that's another very difficult one, it seems, because introducing Scrum and thinking you can limit it to the teams itself, that's an illusion. But as Scrum or the Scrum Guide or Scrum's definition has no rules or instructions on how to embed Scrum, let's say, in the broader organization, people think it's only for the teams. But it's impossible to introduce Scrum without an impact on all of the processes and procedures and whatever and organizational structures around Scrum. And that is another, I think, important evolution of Scrum. So next to restoring the balance between the process and the people aspect of Scrum, no longer shying away from changing, updating the organization around Scrum. That means HR procedures, budgeting procedures. How do you fund initiatives like that self-designing aspect? How do you allow teams to sort of be dedicated and not intervene in the team composition, how to work with quality, release procedures, and so on, up to HR, how do you review people, how do you measure performance, how do you motivate people, how will you reward people, incentive bonuses, maybe even potentially salaries. All those things will be impacted if you introduce Scrum. Now, I can say that as a strong statement, but it's not reality because it seems that a lot of organizations, if not all of them, think that they can totally avoid that. And it baffles me. How can you introduce Scrum without sensing, feeling, have an impact on all those things around Scrum? So that is an important thing. It's what I called at some point of time, again, 20 years of Scrum, and then after a while you start fitting pieces of the puzzle together, which is a very strange thing. It's also what I call in a sort of alternative approach that I developed at some point of time to give people an alternative to what at that time certainly a lot of organizations were calling agile transformations, whatever is in that word. I've tried to offer an alternative, and it consists of sort of two improvement loops, if you want. And the one was called reimagining your Scrum. So let's rethink. So you've done Scrum, you sort of miss the results, you miss the benefits, you miss the progress. It's sometimes what I call the illusion of agility. You've thought you introduced Scrum, but you did it on an industrial basis. A cookbook, you copy paste it what other companies are doing. You just have some sort of model that you're blindly following. You're sort of ignoring the uniqueness of every instance of Scrum. You're introducing Scrum in an industrialized way, like another sign of industrializing your Scrum to death is what I call it, is all teams across the whole organization have to do 2 week sprints, and all of their sprints have to start and end on the same date. And that totally baffles me because it takes out all of the openness of Scrum. It takes out sort of the oxygen out of Scrum. You can't breathe anymore. Scrum says, to give that example, sprint should not be longer than 4 weeks. That's the only rule that we have. Within that rule, maybe for one product, you could do 2 week sprints, another product, 3 week sprints, another part of the organization, 3 weeks. It depends on technology, your context, your users, your user base, whatever you expect, your stakeholder involvement, and so on. So that is industrializing your Scrum to death. So they introduce Scrum in an industrialized way, thinking they can limit it to the teams only. And then after a while, often several years, 2 to 3 to 4 years, they wake up finding, where is the improvement? Our customer satisfaction is not increasing. Our competitive position is not increasing. Our stakeholders are not more happy. Our teams are not more happy. Engagement is not increasing. So energy, and then they wonder why. So I've tried to give an alternative to that industrial approach. I called it to reversify. Well, I don't want to go into that too much, but it's based upon 2 improvement loops, reimagining your Scrum. So let's have a look at one part of the organization, one service, a product, a project, whatever, a department, whatever, where you're doing Scrum, and let's have a good look at that and improve how you're doing that. Reset, almost reboot your Scrum by thinking about the real product that you're building, the service in terms of end users, what I call consumers of your product. Then allow the teams, invite the teams to reorganize to optimally serve that product and bring value to end users as quickly as possible, and facilitate them with tools and environments and so on to start creating what I call tasty sashimi slices of product. That's one part, reimagine your Scrum, but only for one product, not for the whole organization, because it will be chaos again, just for one part of the organization. And then next to that, while doing that, reimagine your Scrum, that says resetting, rebooting, upgrading, changing, tweaking your instance of Scrum, including probably rethinking your sprint length. At the same time, it's what I call re-emerging the structures around Scrum. So don't shy away from having a look at the organization. And it starts in what I call arming for value, meaning make your work revolve around value. Organize your product backlog for value. Product owners, order your product backlog for value, add maybe attributes for value things. Think about what is most important at what point of time in terms of value for your consumers, value for your stakeholders, value even for the team, maybe even value what I call about the planet, maybe. Why not value for society? So organize your product backlog for value. And then start working with value and close the feedback loop with your users regularly, frequently, so that your assumptions of value can be validated or invalidated. And then you learn from that and use that to reorganize, reorder your work in your product backlog. So it's what I call to arm for value, assign value or anticipate value on your product backlog, release, ARM, release, and then measure the outcome, the impact that you're having. And that is also a shift from volume to value, which is also a shift from output to outcome. Yeah? And then measure that, but like I like to say in Scrum, inspection without adaptation is pointless. It's an act of futility. It's even at the level of sprints, and I think you will recognize it. How many teams out there are just doing the sprint planning, daily scrum, just to inspect and not to adapt? Meaning
Absolutely.
daily scrum is just a status meeting. The sprint review is all about what have you done, and not using that to look forward to what are we going to do now. Sprint planning is all about just quickly making a selection of product backlog items without thinking about how are we going to implement that, what will be the impact on this, what will be maybe the design, the tasks, the activities that we need to do. So that's all about inspection without adaptation. Now, if you're arming for value, meaning assigning value, releasing regularly, and then measuring the outcome via metrics, I don't know, customer satisfaction, team engagement, money, sustainability of your systems for the planet, and so on. So you measure that you should use to adapt, because that is in a way the inspection part of the empirical process. You have to adapt that. In that sense, adapt your Scrum zone. Have a look at your teams, facilities that they have, tools that they have, authorizations that they have or not have, education that they might be needing. And then also you put the matter of sort of professional development also in the hands of people themselves, which is a way of self-organization too, for more than just self-managing them, but potentially also adapt the organization around it. How do you involve product management? I don't know, sales, marketing, all those things that need to happen for a product. How do you involve them? How can you make them be part of a little ecosystem that revolves around the product, so that you don't just use Scrum to more frequently deliver valuable increments of the product, but also having all the skills and the people around that to be part of that. So adapting your Scrum zone for value, but also gradually adapting, changing the organization around it. And that's what I call from arming for value, so ARM, to arm for value, going to form an armada of value, because you want to arm for value and then adapt, ADE, adapt for value. And that is important. And I feel Scrum is very much needed and will be needed in the future. But if Scrum practitioners like ourselves around the world don't start bringing this, I don't know, some sort of vision of the future of Scrum out there and share it with people, then Scrum might disappear, although I am convinced that it's really needed. But the reason it will disappear is that people are trying to combine it with that industrial mindset or that industrial culture. And that's where we have a lot of work to do as Scrum Masters, as coaches. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely true. And I think this is again one of the impediments that the Scrum Master should be able to uncover or help teams and organization, understand about it. And on that, since you mentioned about Scrum Master, I also had a similar thought over here in how can Scrum Masters help, in particular, in ensuring that we are humanizing workplace as a Scrum Master in terms of their capacity.
Yeah. Well, I think you will, based upon your experience, you will, I think, probably agree with me that one of the biggest problems we see with Scrum Masters is that they're only focused on the team.
Absolutely.
There's been another change in the latest Scrum Guide, another one that I'm not too happy over, that they removed the term of servant leadership. Servant leadership is, for me, very important. It's essential in being a Scrum Master. They replace it by being a true leader, between quotes, I believe. Now, that doesn't really help, in my view. It doesn't make it less confusing. So I believe in servant leadership, but I always write servant leadership with a hyphen between. So servant hyphen leadership. And that is important because those two are connected. So a couple of problems with Scrum Masters around the world is that they focus on servancy too much and not enough being a leader, and that they focus on being a servant for the team only. Although we should be servant leaders for the team, but also servant leaders for the organization. So what I miss nowadays is courageous Scrum Master, and courage is an essential value. It's one of the Scrum values. Courageous Scrum Masters that are willing to challenge the status quo. Because that is, for me, that is a sort of, if nowadays I would sort of call Scrum Master a product and try to sell it to the world and have to create a baseline for that. So I put it on the box and say Scrum Master, the baseline for me would be challenging the status quo. In that sense, it's almost like a warning.
Amazing.
If you open up this box a Scrum Master will pop out and he will start challenging your status quo, which is what most companies don't like. But they don't see that people don't do it to irritate or frustrate people. They do it for the better of the best of the company. So what I miss nowadays is so we have in a way massively introduced Scrum over the, let's say, past 20 years. Scrum has replaced the old school waterfall process. But you know what? It's just a massive presence of Scrum. What I miss is people challenging that status quo. So, okay, cool. Now we've done Scrum. What is next? What now? People asking those questions. What now? And challenging existing implementations of Scrum. And I've mentioned several of the things: humanizing the workplace, that people aspect, reinforcing self-organization, moving from volume to value. In a way, in the end, helping organizations move from the industrial paradigm to the agile paradigm, which is a very different one. That is what I miss. We have become, I feel, overly complacent. And we have achieved a lot. I'm not denying that, but there's so much more that we can still do. And that's for me the role of the Scrum Master. Challenging the organization, challenging the status quo, potentially even challenging the need for agile coaches. Because one of the problems is often in organizations, Scrum Master, oh yeah, that's for the team. And then we've got agile coaches to work with the organization or work with leadership. And that is a sort of, that creates a schism, that creates a sort of splitting up something that should be in one person. That is removing the holistic thing. It's not helpful. It's sort of like the same we see with product owners, right? Product owner is not just team-oriented role. Product owner also should be representing stakeholders, users, consumers, key users, product managers, and so on. In a way, a product owner brings those worlds together. So having a product owner to work with the team, and then whatever people would call somebody else, often called a product manager, to sort of know the market and the user, again, that is the same split up, same schism that doesn't work. So Scrum Masters should be servant leaders for the organization too, and challenging the status quo, starting from this belief that every single human being, no matter where he or she lives, has the intrinsic ability to self-organize. And it's organizational culture that is blocking that is impeding that. And as a Scrum Master, don't try to push or pressurize people. Remove all the things within the organization that is limiting, that is blocking people from applying that intrinsic ability that everybody has to self-organize.
Wow, that's so amazing way of putting the role of a Scrum Master in this entire scheme of things. I could literally visualize the product part that you mentioned about Scrum Master, where you put up a tagline saying challenging the status quo and a Scrum Master popping up. It literally brought in front of me. That's such an amazing way of putting out the description. And one of the important points that you mentioned is, though we are seeing the presence of Scrum, what I look at is that there is the presence of Scrum, but the essence of Scrum is what is missing. So I think that is what should be there in every Scrum Master, definitely. And I agree on the point that Scrum Masters are just playing at a surface level, or a mechanical Scrum that we call, or at a team level, whereas they need to go beyond. And also, I believe that you be a Scrum Master or an Agile coach, you should be open to maybe interchange the roles. I mean, not every team or every project requires Scrum, or not every project requires an Agile coach. So you should be open to play both the roles, is what I feel. And that's where the divide comes, right? So at a team level, Scrum Master; at an organization level, Agile coach. So that's beautiful way.
And then we're introducing sort of this agile way of working via Scrum, and we're just sort of using it to keep the existing structures in place. Because I think if you have this beautiful visual imagination, Ramya, you can also visualize sort of the typical hierarchical pyramid type of structure.
Yeah.
And then just we keep all the things in place, but we just put a new title in it, Agile Coach and Scrum Master and so on. And that is not helpful because that pyramid structure is based upon an industrial way of working, an industrial way of thinking. It's not flexible, it's rigid rather than agile.
Yeah, absolutely. And this brings to the end of the episode. I mean, the last question. Uh, so, if you were to give an advice to leaders, what advice would you like to give to leaders, Scrum Masters, HRs in this journey of humanizing the workspace?
Well, I've worked over many years. I've also worked with let's start there with CXO level teams and people. And I've sometimes, sometimes you have to play with language a little bit. And I've invited many of them to become what I call in their case servant managers. As managers, please serve people, help people, facilitate people. In that sense, move from managing people to managing the environment. So certainly leadership is that advice already from that paper, 1986, the new product development game, manage from the outset. Help people, support people, provide funding to them, um, uh, encourage them, but don't intervene in their daily work. Manage from the outset, in
Wow.
that sense, manage by joining sprint reviews and giving feedback.
Wow, that's such an amazing advice to give. That makes so much sense. Thank
Okay,
you
you're
so
welcome.
much. Thank you so much, Gunther, for giving this time to us. And this podcast is more like a masterclass for Scrum, masterclass for actually understanding the essence of Scrum and why we say that we need to humanize the workspace. I think just this podcast, whoever would be listening, it would help them at any level that they are operating, be it at a team level, on organization level, be it a CXO level. I think this is going to be a game changer. Thank you so much for sharing so many insights, wonderful stories, and it was great honor and lovely talking to you, Gunther. Thank you so much once again.
Yeah, thank you, Ramya and Vivek, for having me.
Thank you,
It was a
Gunther.
pleasure. I'm always happy that people offer me a channel to express my beliefs and, in a way, my commitment. It's how I want to improve the world. Yeah.
Thank you so much for watching this episode patiently till the end. We hope you enjoyed the episode. We'll meet you again in the next episode. Till then, if you like a podcast show, then do like, share, subscribe, and let us know your feedback in the comment section. You can also listen to the episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Audible. Thank you.